This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Is there a sports podcast in Detroit that people are talking about?
Hey, everybody, this is Freddie Cohen of ESPN Radio. When I'm not talking about breaking news or breaking news on ESPN Radio, I'm always a fan and listen to the Detroit Sports Podcast, and so should you.
So, cuz I just took a sip from my Michigan State coffee cup, and is it weird? I feel all gross inside looking at what's going on this week. I mean, everywhere, nationally, locally, podcast, Doc and Jock. Jason and I had to address it. We're going to talk about it later on in this podcast, but this whole Dr. Larry Nassar situation has put really a black cloud all over Michigan State supporters and things like that. And the part that's really scary is we're basically just at the forefront, the very beginning of looking at what really took place with Dr. Larry Nassar, who knew what when, and Joel Ferguson earlier this week put his foot in his mouth and made the situation even worse. I didn't even think there was an opportunity to make it worse, but we'll talk about it later on in this podcast. But man, I can't even drink a cup of coffee from my favorite university because of the fact that it's a huge mess, a black cloud kind of to start this podcast, eh?
Yeah, for sure, man. It's gross. It really is. When you sit back and you read all of the articles and you read everything that's come out about this and you listen to the testimony from the victims, it's disgusting. And this guy was essentially just a predator. The MSU and the United States gymnastics just brought victims to lay at his feet, and he just went to town on them. It's gross.
It's very
disgusting. If you're a male and you listen to this stuff, you feel awful. If you're a father, it makes you sick to your stomach. If you're just a parent in general, a sports fan, just anybody who has listened or has just come in contact with any of these dealings, it makes you sick.
At the time of this recording, Dr. Larry Nassar will be hopefully sentenced to the full amount, 40 years. Some of the victims have called for him when he does address the media, if he chooses to actually start telling people who knew what when to help the healing process. But it's going to take time. It's going to take multiple investigations. And knowing that it's not going to be a quick fix, you hope that the end result of the investigations is to prevent this from happening, not only at Michigan State, but any institution. And we'll talk about leadership. We'll talk about the administration later on in this podcast. But on this very episode, Doc and Jock, episode 233, we're going to start off talking about the Lions and Matt Patricia, recapping the AFC and NFC title games. We have to peek into what's going on with the Detroit Pistons. Each and every opportunity that they go on to the basketball court, on the road or at home, is kind of disappointing in several aspects in terms of their effort, execution. At the time of this recording, Donovan Mitchell and the Utah Jazz are coming to town, and I'm just crossing my fingers he doesn't drop 40 on us. In previous meetings with other draft picks that we've kind of looked at, they've come into town, and they haven't actually executed on us, but I got a feeling Donovan Mitchell is going to want to show SVG what he passed up on, and I can't wait to talk about the Pistons because I think you and I both have very strong feelings regarding the state of the Detroit Pistons. But to start this podcast, you know what we got to do. So Lions fans are going to have to wait at least until February 5th to officially have the guy that we want to run the organization be the head coach, Matt Patricia. But in terms of watching what he's been able to do throughout this postseason, it's all good, man. I really was impressed regarding what he was able to do versus Jacksonville. A little bit nervous up front in that he gave up a bunch of yards and points to Jacksonville, but when it was crunch time, when it was time to step it up in the second half, time to allow your team the chance, that Patriots defense gave the New England offense a chance to come back in that game. And that's all you can ask for throughout the talks and kind of talking to people, watching the games at the bar and at home and kind of consulting with people. A lot of people are impressed. Vito loves him. Everybody that you talk to is really impressed because he's the number one choice. Everybody is looking at and evaluating Matt Patricia favorably and looking at it critically, do you think, though, honestly, he can execute a bend, don't break defense with the Lions? Because that defense is fascinating. It is complex. He did dial up blitzes at the right time that got there. Key guys that sometimes we never hear of make plays that are young. Gilmore on that fourth down play, the defender there made an awesome play and prevented Jacksonville from executing that first down. But you look at it and you say, can he take that system realistically, get the guys to execute it? Because Boomer Esiason said something, and those that are detractors have said something. They say, basically, Matt Patricia is not Bill Belichick. And the main ingredient, the main recipe, the main spice that makes the New England Patriots so awesome, so one of the premier organizations in the entire world, is not Matt Patricia. It's Bill Belichick. And that's why the tree, the coaches that have left haven't necessarily had that success. But when I sit back and I say, look, all you can do is give yourself the opportunity. We can't sit here and say it's going to work. But right now, after watching the AFC title game, after watching Matt Patricia, the emotion that he saw, the bear hug that he gave Belichick, by all accounts, people that are evaluating him, I'm sold. I'm ready for this era to begin, and I'm not going to predict success or failure, but I'm ready for his era to begin.
That's good, because if we go back to Sunday and we go back to partway through that second quarter, you were not there at all. You were like, this can't be the guy that the Lions want, right?
Because all I kept thinking was, okay, now karma's going to take over because his name has now been affiliated. He stepped foot in Allen Park. The Lions organization force is going to get a hold of him. Maybe it will
it's like
in the
Detroit
Super Bowl.
Lions are a virus, and they just infected him and made him sick, and he forgot how to coach all of a sudden.
Remember, the force could be waiting for 2 weeks, not versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. The force would be like, no. We'll let you get to the Super Bowl. We'll just let you get defeated by Nick Foles. Maybe he'll make the blunder. Maybe he'll get out-coached by Doug Peterson in the Super Bowl. It's probably not likely to happen, but it's still there. Matt Patricia now has been infected with the Lions force, so let's see if he actually dials up the right game plan to stop Nick Foles, because Philly can do some things. I like that team.
Yeah, Philly looks like I'm
excited for the Super Bowl.
Contender. I am too. It looks like it's going to be a really good one. Great teams, honestly. The New England Patriots, what can you say? What hasn't been said about these guys? And just look at everything good that the Eagles have done. I mean, they're doing this with essentially a backup quarterback, and the guy's played incredible football over the course of the last couple games that he's been underneath center. So it's been outstanding.
But looking at it, are you ready potentially to see the Lions give up a bunch of yards, time of possession, but then clamp down? It's similar to what they've been doing. It's just late in games under Terrell Austin, they were not able to make that final play needed. And it seems like Matt Patricia's defenses, they only gave up 3 points, I believe, in the whole entire second half. They clamped down on Jacksonville, and when the time came to perform, he dialed it up. It's going to be interesting to see, because where we're at as Lions fans is we want to see good starts. We want to see the team not fall behind 10-0, 13-0, or be behind in so many games. Give Matthew Stafford the chance to have the lead. And unfortunately, on two sides of the ball, if your defense is giving up a ton of yards, Stafford might not be on the field in the first half. It's harder to get into that offensive rhythm. And that schedule, you're not going up against crumb bums. You're playing some teams that can perform and have a history of solid defenses. So it's going to be interesting to see. Are you ready to look at that defense and say, all right, man, do your thing and dial it up, and don't give up the key moments, dial up the pressure at the right times, and also hopefully move up the rankings of the scoring defense, because it seems like the Patriots' scoring defense is always in the top 10.
I want to go back to Sunday, all right, and just look at what Matt Patricia was able to do against the Jacksonville Jaguars. In that second half, they gave up a total of 6 points, okay? So you're off by 3, but they gave up a total of 6 points. But if you look at the scoring plays that they gave up, I mean, we're talking a field goal of 54 yards, and we're talking a field goal of 43 yards. If you're going to tell me that you have a head coach who can come in and make halftime adjustments, something that the Detroit Lions struggled with for years, even under Coach Caldwell, struggled with making halftime adjustments and shutting teams down in second halves to win football games, the Lions haven't been able to do it in forever. And to see Matt Patricia come out and do it in this second half when everything is on the line, and you have to be able to give your offense a chance to win a game, and he goes out and he does it. And he only gives up a 54-yarder and a 43-yarder. If you're going to tell me that a head coach can come in and only give up 2 plays where I'm willing to roll the dice and there's a good possibility that they're going to miss those field goals, because a 54-yard field goal and a 43-yard field goal aren't a chip shot. You need some help there. If you mean to tell me that you're going to give up those 2 scoring plays over the course of an entire half where you've got to win a football game and you can't give up any points, I'm going to take it all day long. Matt Patricia has shown the ability to not just coach up lesser talent, but be able to put that lesser talent in position to win games, and then to be able to do it on the biggest stage and put a team in position to win that game and actually come away the victor. You got yourself a hell of a football coach here. And it scares me that we've got to wait till February 5th to be able to call him our own. Anything and everything can happen at this point. And you're right. Belichick is the brains of the operation there, but Matt Patricia plays a large part, and he has taken on a role as the I don't know if you want to call him the second fiddle, but he has been the right-hand man of Bill Belichick now for years, and he's learned at basically the knee and the behest of Bill Belichick, the greatest in the game.
Yeah, it would be negligent not to give him a chance because of the fact that he is part of the Patriots organization. He's been part of winning championships. He's seen what Bill Belichick has done night in and night out, day in and day out, game in and game out. He's been around that system, and you hope that the marriage of Patricia and Bob Quinn can work out and result in playoff success. But what scares a lot of Lions fans is that now that tree has broken, and the coaches from the Patriots tree this crop, Mike Vrabel got hired by the Titans. McDaniels is probably going to leave as well to take over the Colts job, and we get Matt Patricia. Many Lions fans are fearful that the other two will have success and we won't. Mike Vrabel will take Mariota and get him deeper into the postseason. Obviously what's going on over there in Indy is going to take a little bit more time, but there's a big upceiling when you have the quarterback in place and you got Josh McDaniels, who now has the opportunity to learn from previous mistakes and handle your business and maybe take the Colts franchise to the next level. And then you got the Lions, and you go, please, just don't let this branch, this wave of coaches for the Patriots be successful and not Matt Patricia. That's all we're hoping for. Is we hope for Patricia to hit the job and hit the ground running so that the Lions can have success, because we're starving for success, and we got to sit here and wait year in and year out, and we just don't. This time around, we got the first choice. We got the guy that we want, and now you're looking towards a defensive team, probably with the same offensive coordinators. But what's your thoughts on this wave of Patriots coaches taking jobs?
Out of everybody that you named, Mike Vrabel, Josh McDaniels, and Matt Patricia, out of all of them, I think the one guy who has the ability to step in and with the team that he's acquiring and that he's taking over, the ability to generate the most success, at least early and over the long haul, I do believe it's Matt Patricia.
Because you got Stafford.
You've got Matt Stafford.
But McDaniels will get Andrew Luck. That's a good starting point.
But if you look at what goes on in Indy's kind of a crapshoot. It is a dumpster fire when you look at what you got going on at the very, very top with ownership, and you look at that offensive line that they have there, and that defense is aging, and it's very questionable as to what you're going to get there. I really think Matt Patricia steps in and has the most success early and has the most success over the long haul, just because I think there is what you have ownership that's willing to come in and pay the price, and you've got a team and you've got a general manager who are willing to do whatever it takes to make this team successful. It's not just having Matt Stafford, because like you said, the Colts have Andrew Luck, and you don't know if Andrew Luck's going to be healthy or not, but Andrew Luck coming out of college and in his first couple seasons was Andrew Luck. He was a guy that everybody was willing to bet the future on to get him and to sit there and put him underneath center. But you look at the Detroit Lions and the way they're set up right now. I think if you roll the dice on this offensive line, you put Matt Stafford behind it, I think you've got a really good offense that is only a piece or two away. You look at that defense. The defense needs to figure out what it's going to do with its front seven, but its secondary, and that's where Matt Patricia has made all of his money, is with his secondary. That secondary looks dangerous. It looks to be one of the best secondaries out there. I think Matt Patricia, you put him in with this system, with this general manager, with this quarterback, and with this offensive line, I think he's set to do big things going forward.
Okay.
I think he's got moves to make. Let's be honest. He's got moves to make. And I think he's starting to make some of them. You're already seeing the exodus of some of the guys on the offense being released or saying that they're going to go take other jobs. The big question comes down to what's going to happen to Jim Bob Cooter. And I think real sneaky you're seeing Matt Patricia start to kind of tell you what's going to happen with Jim Bob Cooter. I don't know if Jim Bob Cooter is going to be here when all the pieces kind of fall into place here and Matt Patricia takes the helm. But you've got some Jim Bob Cooter's guys basically being shown the door. What's going on is Matt Patricia is setting it up to where don't be surprised if Jim Bob Cooter leaves, say, February 6th or is shown the door on February 6th. I don't think it's set in stone that Jim Bob Cooter is going to be your next offensive coordinator here.
Yeah, and especially I like to hear the news that Patricia from afar is telling the defensive staff, look, sorry, but your time's up. And by all accounts, there's going to be a whole new defensive staff on the Detroit Lions, and that's what you want to see. You just want to see a clean sweep, a new coach bring in his guys. What people are talking about, I know you're seeing it, is a lot of teams like the Houston Texans, now you see the Detroit Lions, a lot of teams are trying to copy the Patriot way. It's so hard to do and execute, but if you're going to copy a franchise, I mean, there's only a certain few that you would copy from, maybe the Denver Broncos, maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers, but if you're going to copy off of an organization that's had success, might as well copy the Patriot way, and we've talked about it in previous podcasts. I think it's fine to go that route. It's just really hard to execute it, but hey, us Lions fans, we're waiting. We're definitely patient. Matt Patricia is going to be able to probably balance both things, starting to kind of set the scene for his administration. You got people now looking at the coaches and what's going to take place. And then the most important thing is, obviously, how is that marriage going to work with Bob Quinn? And many people are starting now to kind of sprinkle in the debate, which side of the ball should the Lions attack with their first couple picks? Because those are the impact players in the draft. You got to make some important selections. And looking at some early mock drafts, a lot of people at first have the Lions taking a defensive player. You've looked at a mock draft from CBS Sports. Tell me a little bit of what this Chris Tarpasso has in terms of his mock draft, because for me personally, I'm okay with focusing on the defense. Obviously, it makes logical sense. You got a defensive coach. He's going to lobby for strong defenders. But in terms of where you're at, it looks like impactful running backs might be there in the first, second, and third round. So I'm hoping that they address that early as opposed to later, because my confidence level in terms of Bob Quinn picking up a guy in the fifth round and having him be successful in terms of the level that we need, not there just yet. But what do you think about the Lions targeting a defender in the first round?
Yeah, I think running back is going to be a high priority this draft, and I think it has to be a high priority.
Yeah, yes it is.
This is an extremely deep draft for running backs. You're going to be able to get somebody, whether it be in the first, second, or third round, who I think is going to be able to make an impact. But looking at this mock draft, Vita Vea from a defensive tackle from Washington. Now, this guy draws comparisons to Haloti Ngata. He's a big, thick guy who can take up the middle. He's an outstanding player by all accounts. I haven't watched a ton of Washington football to be able to tell you when college football. Oh, you're not sold. Look, when college football season rolls around, yeah. I'm basically nose deep in Big Ten play, and I pay attention to a little bit of the SEC.
I've seeing some mock drafts. I've looked into him. His name has been brought up. It's not the sexy pick that you kind of want with your first pick as a head coach, but in terms of what he brings to the table, it would be a solid pick. I'm ready to roll the dice. I'm ready to step up to the big boy table and throw my name in the ring for Saquon Barkley, because why go out there and try and get a secondary guy when the horse is right there?
So
get him.
A 6'5", 340-pound defensive tackle doesn't do it for you, huh? The guy who is going to basically take over the reins from Haloti Ngata, very little coaching that probably has to be done here.
Hey, he'll be impactful. I'm just saying it's not sexy. I mean,
but you want to go Saquon.
I want Saquon.
You want
Barkley.
Saquon Barkley.
You're going to have to trade up.
And if you look at this mock draft, you're going to have to trade up to at least the fifth spot.
And me and Jason talked about it's going to probably require 2 first-rounders, maybe 2 second-rounders to move up. You might have to mortgage some early picks in the future, but isn't it worth it? Wouldn't you say that it's worth it if you want the guy? Look at that. So Stafford, Tate, and Saquon Barkley.
I was going to say, if Bob Quinn is able to procure Saquon Barkley, be able to trade whatever it is that's needed Does this offense now become elite? Is it able to sit there and challenge offenses like, I don't know, the Philadelphia Eagles? What's going on in St. Louis? Is it able to challenge the types of what you've got going on in New England with Tom Brady?
To be realistic, that's just a piece. Now you get the finished product, then you got to build the offensive line again. You don't
think that this offensive line is going to come together? Mind you, this offensive line has only played about 10% of its plays as it was supposed to be constructed due to injuries. You don't think that they could roll the dice on this offensive line as constructed and be able to get the production that they were hoping to get this year, next year, with a running back like Saquon Barkley?
So you're saying that potentially the addition of a Saquon Barkley could infuse that offensive line with some energy and make them and force them to actually block properly and develop a scheme. It's all about the scheme. It's about implementing a proper scheme and executing it.
I think that this offensive line was hamstrung from the beginning when you've got your starting left tackle who's going to miss the majority of the season. And then as the season rolls along, you've got to lean so heavily on that right side to sit there and run the ball and to block properly when you're passing the ball, that those guys ended up buckling underneath that pressure. Because if you remember early on, all they did was they ran to the right. When they passed the ball, you were getting most of your blocking done from that right side of the ball or from that right side of the line because that was where your strength was. And those guys ended up buckling underneath that pressure and ended up succumbing to injuries early in the season, and those lingered late in the season. And by the time that you were able to get your left tackle back and you were able to see this offensive line as you wanted to see it constructed, you had a offensive tackle who was coming back who was rehabbing an injury, and then you had a left tackle and a left guard who they themselves were just trying to limp through the season dealing with their own injuries, not to mention what happened to your center and to your left guard. So I don't think at any point during this season you really got to see what you wanted to see out of this offensive line as it was supposed to be constructed. I think going into next season, if you were to infuse a player like Saquon Barkley, put him in there with this offensive line, I think it looks totally different. And I think this offense then looks extremely elite. I would say this offense is a top 3 offense in the NFL. And if you were to do that and you were to trade that many assets to go out and get that guy, you then have to look at what you're doing in free agency, and you've got to devote that to your defense. You've got to devote the majority of whatever is left of this draft to defense because your defensive line is, I don't want to say it's in shambles, but you're potentially going to lose Ziggy Ansah. You've got Haloti Ngata, who's going to become a free agent. So you've got to address not just that front four, but now you've got to start adding some pieces because we talked about it before. This linebacking core is not deep on this team right now. You need more guys. You need more playmakers back there in your linebacking core. So you've got to devote essentially the rest of this draft to your front 7. I mean, you're basically one and done on offense then, is what you're saying.
Yeah, go for it. I'm saying, probably it's not going to happen. This is wishful thinking, and I know it's kind of funny. It sounds counterintuitive. I'm a guy that wants to build around the defense. I want a stellar defense. I want
and you're a guy who regularly wants to trade back.
I want to trade back to get more picks.
You want more picks.
I want more picks. But at the same time, you do see that the Lions defense last year was able to do some things with all the takeaways. It seems like they got talented individuals in the secondary, and it seems like you can also fill in terms of maybe some guys that were drafted year 1 and 2 in the Bob Quinn regime taking the next step. The A'Shawn Robinsons, the Jared Davises of the worlds taking the next step and allowing the Detroit Lions to continue to build that defense. And so it's exciting. I like the fact that they're trying to build through defense. That's how you win championships, and then that will take the pressure off of Matthew Stafford. But that's just wishful thinking in terms of getting the best guy. I think the odds of Saquon Barkley being a Detroit Lion are pretty low because he's going to go in the top 5. It's pretty much anywhere from Cleveland to Denver, 3, 4, 5. That's where Saquon's going. You're going to have to roll the dice huge, and I don't see the Lions, and just based on their history, going up 15 spots to take Saquon Barkley. It's just wishful thinking.
The one thing I will say about Chris, how do we say this? Trapiso, whatever. The one thing I will say about his mock draft from CBS Sports is the one player he ends up going out and identifying at defensive tackle, Vita Vea, is essentially the clone of Haloti Ngata. And you've seen what happened when Haloti Ngata went down after week 5. This defense struggled mightily to stop the run. going by what you had in those first 5 weeks of football, this was a game-changing defense. It was stopping the run. It was able to force turnovers. They were winning the turnover battle, and they were forcing more turnovers than they were turning the ball over they themselves. And it was a top 5 defense with Haloti Ngata in there. So if you mean to tell me you can go get a guy who is like Haloti Ngata, and you compare him with Haloti Ngata if you bring him back, and you have another year with most of these guys along that defensive line and in this in that back seven, I think you've got something special there defensively with a defensive coach like Matt Patricia. So there's a lot there, and I don't think they're in such a bad spot that we maybe thought they were going into drafting at 20. Do you remember earlier in the season when they were starting to win some games late and they ended up putting themselves in a weird spot where they had to win this game, win that game, win this game to make it to the playoffs? The next thing you know, you've seen their draft stock plummet from being what would have been within the top 10 to now being outside the top 15 to what ended up becoming a top 20 pick. And we were all like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you winning these football games? Go get the best player available and start losing games. Get higher rated guys who are in the top 10, possibly in the top 5. I think if you were to look at where they're at now, drafting at 20 might not be so crucial. It might not be as bad as originally thought, especially with a guy like Matt Patricia coming in and looking at what you had with that defense when Haloti Ngata was in there. And if you go get a guy like this who is basically a prototype of what Haloti Ngata is, I think you're okay.
Before we shift gears and talk about the Pistons, you excited about the participants in this year's Super Bowl? Get you going, get the juices flowing. Eagles,
I think this
Patriots.
is going to be an outstanding Super Bowl. You know, Nick Foles was a guy who I was not sold on, and going into these championship games, I thought he was the weak link. I thought he was the weakest link besides Blake Bortles, and Blake Bortles played a hell of a game. And you know, we sit there and we pan on that guy, but geez Louise, he played a really, really good game, and Jacksonville, they themselves played an incredible game. But man, Nick Foles looks, I don't know, he looks like Nick Foles, like the guy they drafted, and he looks like that Nick Foles from his rookie and sophomore season right now.
6 rings, Tom Brady, should he walk away? I mean, as we're talking, Gisele Bündchen, a report on the television comes out, asked Feely to kind of talk to Tom Brady and kind of nudge him into retirement. It's kind of funny that right around the time of before the season and after the season, Gisele is kind of keeping her name in the mix. They're trying to, make some news regarding her husband. And he's like, come on, babe, it's not right now. Don't talk about retirement. The dude probably can logistically, because the offensive line for the Patriots keeps him so clean, he can play to 45. Why should he retire? I think he should go for win in ring 6, 7, 8 if he can do it. Why not?
This Patriots football team is going to look really different.
He might not be so protected
after next season.
Yeah.
I think maybe he's got one more clean year, and then after that, the wheels start to fall off. I mean, you're going to start to lose your defensive coordinator, who was highly praised by a ton of top general managers across the NFL. You're going to lose the guy who he has probably had the most success with as his offensive coordinator ever. So that offense is going to change. It sounds like there is a rift between that head coach and that quarterback, being Tom Brady. So I think you're starting to see the cracks in what is the Patriots dynasty, and I think it looks different. I think this might be the last hurrah for this New England Patriots team, and I don't know if they make it back to this level, and I don't think they do it as clean and as successfully as they've done it in years prior and this year. So I think
the days are numbered for Tom Brady.
The jig might be up there. So.
And it might be up as soon as in 2 weeks, because that Eagles team might be coming. They're going to pin their ears back. They got nothing to lose. That's the game plan. The game plan is pretty simple. I can write it for the Eagles. Hit Brady 1, 2, hit Brady, 3, hit Brady, 4, hit Brady. You do all those things, 1 through 4, there's a chance. You get that Vince Lombardi trophy if you can disrupt Tom Brady and you attack that offense from that perspective.
If that defense can hit Tom Brady and force turnovers, you might be looking at the Fly Eagles Fly just blaring at the end of the Super Bowl. And Vinny Stubbs might be the happiest guy in the state of Michigan.
No doubt about it. All right, let's take our first time out, come back. We got to talk about a team that's not making anybody in Michigan happy, the Detroit Pistons. Stay with us. You're listening to Doc and Jock on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Doc and Jock here for our host site, Podomatic.com. When Adam and I first started this project, we were looking for a great place to host all of our recorded audio. And up until this point, we started in 2013, we've recorded 800 to 900 weekly podcasts, and we've only used one host site, and that's Podomatic. Why do we use them? Why did Doc and Jock choose Podomatic.com? Because it's super easy, great customer service. We rant and rave about Detroit sports. We've seen the ups and downs of the organizations here in town. We've had great times doing these podcasts. We went from the basement to the studio office here in Sterling Heights, and we've been able to grow this network because we have a great host site. We're able to generate quality links. All of our supporters across the country and even overseas can listen to our fine product. And thank goodness for that. So if you're looking to start a brand new project, you want to do a podcast, you want to get in the mix here and talk about Detroit sports or do your own podcast regarding whatever you're interested in, you need a great host site. And definitely check out Podomatic.com. So you kind of peek into the Detroit Pistons cause, and each time you watch them, you go, okay, they have the semblance of a team. They have a semblance of a roster that can do some things, and many people now are starting to point to, look, is this roster being coached properly? Is this roster being looked at properly? Does Stan Van know which players to put in the rotation properly together? Time in and time out, you see these swings, and when you have an inconsistent team, you start to look to coaching. And I know some people will blame the injury to Reggie Jackson. You'll blame other, a myriad of reasons why this team is not as successful. But as we're recording this, the Pistons are not in the playoff mix, sitting at the 9th seed, and many people are starting to point the fingers at Stan Van Gundy, and they're asking the question, really, are the Pistons in the right hands with this dude? And you look at it and you say, well, some of the trade rumors that are coming out, some of the requests that are being made, it doesn't look like Stan Van Gundy really can even make a solid move with the roster that he has, because let's just say, for example, you hear the rumors regarding Kemba Walker. Michael Jordan's going to make demands, and he's going to try and fleece you. He's going to want a Stanley Johnson. He's going to want some draft picks. He's going to want a Kennard. He's going to want some of your players, and you go, they're going to ask for the guys that really are going to help, so you can't really improve the team. If you add Kemba Walker and then remove Luke Kennard and Stanley Johnson and a draft pick, it's just not worth it right now even to make a move. I think the most prudent move you can make with this roster, it's hard in the season, really, when you look at basketball, to make a significant move in the season. What most teams do, and you see what Milwaukee did, you see that the most prudent move that you can make quickly to get a little spark out of your team is to fire the head coach. And so I'm not invested in Stan Van Gundy, who's on a one-year deal, making moves. So right now, if Tom Gores is asleep at the wheel, Stan Van Gundy can make moves that could impact the future right in front of him. And so it behooves Tom Gores to really make the decision and say, look, what are we going to do with this guy? Because if you allow him to do the job and he, let's say, makes a big trade and tries to get a Kemba Walker or a Miracic from Chicago, you go, uh-oh, now you've mortgaged the future and you're still at the same spot. Many people, I think, have really thrown their hands up and said, forget it. We're off the SVG bandwagon. It's time that this organization be truly blown up, and let's just start again by removing Stan Van Gundy from both positions. We don't want him as coach. We don't want him as president. We have opportunities now to see a bunch of other players that have been drafted after Pistons draftees, and they're doing a lot better. And it looks like right now nobody in Detroit that's supporting the Detroit Pistons is happy with the direction being stuck in purgatory, where you're just around a 4 to 8 seed. You're just fodder for the top seeds to destroy you. It's not good enough just to make the postseason. Nobody that's watching this is really happy. And I think Tom Gores, if he really were to take a serious look at it, you probably would get a spark by just blowing out SVG and make it happen, because this isn't happening. And unfortunately, if you really, really were honest with yourself, SVG, similar to Caldwell, stopgap. I mean, this was a guy that got a team to the NBA Finals, but in terms of really what has he done, it's kind of overrated. I think that when you just look at what the product is on the court with these guys, I think another coach that had some acumen, that had some presence, that actually had the respect of the players, you probably have, even without Reggie Jackson, you probably have a team that's probably 5 games over 500. And then the move that everybody's pissed off about is, how the hell do you give Langston Galloway 3-year deal, $21 million? So when Reggie Jackson goes down, we're looking to Langston Galloway, and he can't do the job. So what on earth made you think that this dude's worth $7 million per? It's a big mess. SVG can't draft. His drafts are abysmal, and on the court, it seems like his team does not put forth the effort for 48 minutes, despite the fact that he calls them out every game.
What you're seeing is a guy who's a little bit in over his head as a general manager. I think Stan Van Gundy as a head coach is okay. I don't know if he's going to win you a world championship, but I think he's a decent enough head coach. Stan Van Gundy as a general manager, and I know Bowers is the general manager, but Stan Van Gundy as a president, he's the one who's calling all the shots, and he's the one who's making all the moves, and everything lies at his feet when it comes to talent acquisitions and moving guys. Stan Van Gundy as a general manager has hurt this team. 4 years of Stan Van Gundy as the general manager has put this team behind the 8 ball, and you're starting to see it now. He hasn't had a good or significant draft in over 4 years, and this is the point where you start to lean on these players. Stanley Johnson should be that guy who's going to take this team to the playoffs and help get it to that next level, and Stanley Johnson struggles to find the starting lineup most nights. And usually you have to put him there because there's not enough depth on this team or enough talent on this team to be able to push him out of that starting rotation. All right? If you look at what Stan Van Gundy has done acquiring guys through trades, Tobias Harris, he's probably your best player on this team. So pretty good job there. Avery Bradley, I think we can both agree he's a really good player on this team. Ish Smith, I think we both agree that we like him more than we like Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson was a guy that he brought in here and who he decided to build his team around. That's a bad move. That's a black eye on this team. You talk about Langston Galloway, bad move. You just basically wrote a check and you set a whole bunch of money on fire just because. You know, Andre Drummond is probably a decent player with the right talent around him. He's not good enough right now. Stanley Johnson's awful. Absolutely horrible. And we can go back and we can look at the guy's draft history and we can just see. I mean, shoot, you're talking about it right now with guys that they're about to sit there and face off against with the Utah Jazz. I mean, do you realize the Utah Jazz sat there and decided to trade up? The Detroit Pistons could have had him, but the Utah Jazz decided to trade up and grab Donovan Mitchell after the Detroit Pistons passed. And this guy's going to probably be a star. He's going to be a star. But you went out and you were like, oh, no, let's take Luke Kennard. You know what I'm saying?
But then people are saying, what would these guys look in different roles? You know, the Pistons have a roster where some guys need to take time. They're not getting 35 minutes a game. And then you look at Donovan Mitchell, you look at other players that are on teams, they're not that good. So they're being exposed. You're able to put a rookie in there for 35 minutes to let him play and learn on the job. But the Pistons are trying to win. And so I can respect that argument. But at the same time, I do believe everybody that's watching thinks that Donovan Mitchell has a higher ceiling than Luke Kennard. I mean, just look at the last 3 draft picks. You got Ellenson, Johnson, and Luke Kennard. When you look at who you could have had, you could have had a lot better talent that you could develop than those 3 guys. And it just looks like, it looks like that Stan Van's draft is being dissected and really criticized.
You could have Devin Booker and you could have Donovan Mitchell. And right there, your team is 10 times better. And you're able to challenge the guys who are in the East, like a Boston, like a Cleveland, who I know is in turmoil right now, but this is their midseason swoon. And you could have challenged guys like Toronto. With just those 2 guys alone, you could be competing for a legit top 3 playoff spot. A legit top 3 playoff spot. We could be talking about the Detroit Pistons sitting there challenging to be the best in the East, to be the beast in the East. Instead, we're sitting here talking about how Stanley Johnson is the problem and how You got to worry about Reggie Jackson and how Ish Smith, and we've got issues there, and how Luke Kennard deserves more playing time. How Luke Kennard deserves 35 minutes of playing time a night. Really? Luke Kennard deserves 35 minutes of playing time a night? Henry Ellenson? What?
He can't even get on the court.
Exactly. Stan Van Gundy has put this team behind the 8 ball through his general manager duties or lack thereof. And then you see it on the court when he's the head coach because it's just magnified. It's magnified because he can't sit there and get the guys out there and get the talent out there to do the job. The real issue isn't Stan Van Gundy as the head coach. The real issue is Stan Van Gundy as the general manager and in the front office. That's where all of this really ends up being. So when we have talks on Twitter with guys like Steve who want to bring Jason Kidd in,
no,
and he wants to bring in all these other coaches like Mark Jackson, no, that's not the issue. That really isn't the issue. The real issue is Stan Van Gundy as the general manager. And look, Stan Van Gundy, I wouldn't trust him to make a move on February 8th with any of these players because I don't trust Stan Van Gundy to be here for the next year or two. And like you said, with the ownership asleep at the wheel at this point, Tom Gores is a complete idiot and needs to blow Stan Van Gundy out, whether it be him as the coach, whether it be him as the general manager, whether it be him as both. It should be him as both. He needs to go because there should be no reason alive that Stan Van Gundy is allowed to make a trade for a guy like a Kemba Walker, an Evan Fournier, a Nikolai Mirotic. There should be no reason for that to happen. What has to happen at this point, Stan Van Gundy has to go. He has to go, and you have to replace him as a general manager.
Here's the hardest part, too, is that I want him gone as a coach. And then you say, okay, who's out there that you could go get? And you know what the Pistons would do? They'd be like, we've done a thorough search, and we truly believe that this is the guy. This is the guy to bring in here to help the future. They go out there and get Mike Brown. Yeah, they would go and get a retread coach. There's not a lot of young, talented coaches out there, but you could look at some potential candidates out there. Maybe a David Blatt as a retread. You could maybe throw a bone out there to Jeff Van Gundy. If you want to look to college, Kevin Ollie, Tony Bennett. You could look to Jay Wright from Villanova if you want to go out there and get one of the top college coaches. But it is a hard thing to look at and say who's going to replace Stan Van Gundy. But in the end, you do have to kind of declare that you're rebuilding because right now where you're at is you're in purgatory. You're right there in the middle. You're not going to win it all, and you're not going to tank to get talent. So what are you really doing? And the fans don't want to see this. They're not paying to go see that. When you talk about the Pistons, half of the answers people send me are, who cares? You know, you ask a question, who cares? You don't get likes or retweets. You get a bunch of, Pistons suck, let's move on, until they fire SVG, until they fire Ken Holland. We're not interested in the Pistons or the Red Wings. And it's unfortunate because you opened a beautiful building to this. I mean, literally, I'm writing poems on how bad the Pistons play. We're talking about stuff that's not related to winning on the court. I mean, I really don't care that Andre Drummond's bitching on Instagram and Twitter that he didn't make the All-Star team. I mean, yeah, you got to do backflips to get attention because, you know, when you are down 40 points to the Sixers and you're hushing the crowd, you make yourself look like a fool. And everything that's being talked about regarding the Pistons is not relevant. It's what we care about is wins on the court. And when you're mired in a losing streak and you're not playing well and you got tough decisions to make regarding Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, I'm of the opinion that if SVG is smart, he should be afforded the opportunity, if he can, to blow this thing up. Trade Avery Bradley for a first-round pick. Try to trade Tobias Harris for a pick. Try and trade Andre Drummond for a pick and start over. I mean, I think you could logistically sell a complete rebuild by blowing this up because for whatever reason, basketball reasons, personality reasons, the fans of Detroit don't like these Pistons. They just don't. The fans of the Pistons don't like this mix. They're not going to pay for it, and you're not getting me to shell out $55 to go watch that collection of talent. You're not. So the only way I go down there is if the Pistons hook me up with free tickets. Now, they're doing it. It's awesome, but I'm not going down there if it ain't for free. And that's a shame, and that has to be changed. And one of the first things you could do is either eliminate SVG and start over, or if SVG can get somehow or another this team into the playoffs, fine. But you got to find a way to bring in some talent here. You got to find a way either to basically shit or get off the pot, man. You can't be the 4 through 8 seed and get blown out in the first round every single year. You got to see a pattern, and we're not seeing it. So I'm down for the rebuild. I'm down for Team Tank. I would be fine and actually pay attention more if they just said, screw it. Let's just trade everybody. Let's just start over and build 12 guys that can play hoops. But when you get those 12 guys, I don't think SVG should be coaching them.
I'm not going to tell you who the next head coach should be on this team because I don't know who the next head coach should be on this team. What I will tell you is that if the guys who are in charge of this team, and I'm not talking about the general manager, and I'm not talking about the guys who are in the front office in this team. I'm talking about the owners of this team. Is this thing on? Honestly, is it on? Because let me do Tom Gore's job for him. I'm going to tell you who the next general manager should be, and then let that guy go out and tell me who the next head coach should be. So, Tom Gore's, you should be listening to me. Like I said, is this thing on? Tom Gore's, the next general manager of this team.
Oh,
he should be Troy Weaver.
I'm disagreeing. You know what? I'll let you finish. But if you want to do that, maybe you bring back a legacy. And you start with Chauncey Billups. Chauncey.
No. The answer is Troy Weaver. And you say, who is Troy Weaver? I've not heard of this guy. Well, if you follow basketball circles, I will tell you who he is. He is probably the best general manager prospect who hasn't gotten a job. He is the guy who sat there and when Russell Westbrook, you know who Russell Westbrook is, right? He's a pretty good player, yes? No? Yeah, he's a little bit of a malcontent sometimes, but the guy's a triple OG out there in Oklahoma City, right? He is the guy who led the charge to go get Russell Westbrook. When Carmelo Anthony was going to Syracuse, he was the guy who led the charge to get Carmelo Anthony to Syracuse. And if you remember Carmelo Anthony in Syracuse, he was a pretty good player because they ended up going on to be real competitive in the national championship game there. Do you not remember that? The guy that you want is Troy Weaver. Go find him. He has helped turn this team that is Oklahoma City into what they are right now. Who's been at Oklahoma City? Kevin Durant. Oh, wait, he's pretty good, right? And you look at the beard, right? He's pretty good, right? And you look at Russell Westbrook. He's pretty good, right? And who's had a hand in all of these guys? Troy Weaver. Go get him. Bring him in. He's been so good that the Oklahoma City Thunder stop him from interviewing for jobs. They prevent him. They put up walls and say, no, you can't interview for this job because they're so afraid to lose him. So if this thing is on, and I just checked it is, I really and truly hope that the powers that be for the Detroit Pistons are listening. And if somebody, anybody can get this to the boob who likes to sit there and dance with his shirt halfway unbuttoned and the guy who likes to move the community, if somebody can get him to listen to this and then maybe go out there and make a move and go get a guy like a Troy Weaver to be your next general manager, that would be great. And I think the Pistons would probably be in a better place. No, I'm realistic, bitch. I am.
That's it. You're absolutely right. Can't add anything better than that. Let's take our final timeout. We're going to play a round of the Doctors in Session. Jock has even doubled the number of questions because I think he's gaining confidence that I can deliver. But when I review what he's interested in talking about in general, it sounds like he's coming to the table with a lot of questions. So stay tuned. After the break, we'll finish the podcast with a spirited round. We're going to talk about some very tough things. Stay tuned. We appreciate your support. You're listening to Doc and Jock. If you've enjoyed what you've been listening to, thank you for your continued support. Thank you for finding us across the various platforms with which you can find a podcast, Podomatic, Stitcher, our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com, iTunes. We thank you so much for subscribing and rating our podcast. Without it, we wouldn't be able to keep the microphones hot. Adam couldn't bang on the microphones. We couldn't have these spirited debates. We couldn't keep the lights on in the recording studios. We wouldn't be able to advance the project without your support, and we greatly appreciate it. One of the free and easy ways to support us is go visit our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. It's the hub of the operation. You can see which guests have visited the studios. You can see which show airs when. You can see who's behind the craziness that you hear on each and every podcast. We greatly appreciate your support. We can't thank you enough, really. Adam and I have lived a dream doing this project, taking it from where it was to where it is. And we thank you for your continued support. DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Like I said earlier, we are currently watching on Twitter as Dr. Larry Nassar addresses the court. He passed a letter along to the judge, and some of the things that he said kind of have made everybody kind of gasp. And he had the nerve to say, he didn't really, give the vibe off of being apologetic, because he kind of went with the notion of, look, in the state case, what I did was truly medical. And he said that I was manipulated by the attorney general to make a plea of guilty. And the judge asked him, said, look, do you want to change your plea? He said no. And she said, yeah, because you're guilty. But he had the nerve in the letter that he presented to say, and I can't believe she actually read it. I just would have omitted it. But he actually said, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. He actually wrote that on a paper and said it in the courtroom. And I can't believe she read it.
This guy had the audacity to double down on what he did.
He doubled down, cuz I can't believe it, right? He doubled down.
God.
But he did apologize. He did say that what the woman said to him will live with him forever. But you got to remember, there are two parts to this. There's the digital penetration procedure that he did, but there's also reports of him doing some sexually overt things in terms of, exposing himself and other things as well. So I think he's admitting to being guilty for the sexual abuse part, but he's not in terms of the medical procedure that some women have come and talked to. But in the end, it's really gross to talk about. And I know you're going to ask me about it, but in terms of maybe, people were, I know victims get their hopes up that criminals will actually say sorry and make them feel good. But 9.9 times out of 10, when a criminal addresses the court, it just makes things worse. And I just kind of wish that they wouldn't. I wouldn't have cared if he had not addressed the court with a stupid letter that he wrote. And, obviously the judge is letting him have it, saying that he doesn't deserve to ever walk outside of a prison again and things like that. But in the end, this whole scenario is a complete mess, and it's heinous. And really, in the end, it's just the beginning of figuring out what the hell happened. How did we get to this point? And we're going to address it a little bit later on, but this is the Doctors in Session. Let me gather my thoughts, because I know you're going to come at me with some questions regarding this whole ordeal, being that I paid attention to it. Being a Michigan State supporter, I have the perspective of being somebody that's being forced to evaluate how the hell do you feel about it that you went there, and this is what an organization with leadership does to people when bad things happen, and it's not a good look. But let me gather my thoughts. Let's hopefully start with something a little bit less controversial in what we call the Doctor is in Session.
But to be the man, you gotta beat the man, and I'm saying, woo, right here, I'm the man, woo!
All right, so I will take some of the MSU stuff and I'll kind of put it towards the back burner here, just to allow you to kind of gather your thoughts a little bit and to try to put some of your anger and your rage, just kind of temper it a little bit. With all that being said, we started this podcast is great today because it really does circle back around, and it does come full circle on a couple of different topics. And honestly, it was like a beautiful onion, because we just kind of keep peeling back the layers, and there's more and more and more that we get to discuss and talk about. But going back to what we opened the podcast with, as far as Tom Brady and him possibly being the greatest football player of all time. Do you believe that, or do you think he might be more a product of the system?
I can't sit here and not give Tom Brady props. You look at it and you sit down, you watch a game, all the talk. What was the talk prior to the game? What's going on with the dude's hand? Are the stitches going to affect him? Dude, first possession, dropping dimes. Literally, there's the greatest thing you can call somebody is the ultimate competitor, the ultimate team guy. And everyone now is continuing the debate of whether it's Tom Brady, is it Joe Montana? Really, in the end, it's nice to be involved in the conversation at all. People have a high reverence for Tom Brady and what he's able to do. I do believe there's a strong chance he's going to win that 6th ring. Is he the greatest football player of all time? Very much can be debated. I'm willing to say yeah, because of the fact that he puts in the time and because of the way the story was presented. This dude wasn't even considered the best guy on his college team. His head coach kept waffling back and forth between him and Drew Henson. He didn't get a chance to fully solidify his opportunity at Michigan. He gets into the league as a 6th-round pick. He fights his way in. He doesn't even earn a starting job. He gets thrust into a starting job because Drew Bledsoe got injured. He gets into it and then takes his team to win the Super Bowl, and then you continue to, a guy like that could just ride off into the sunset after that. But no, he doubled down. He kept working. And so the reason why I call him the greatest football player of all time is because where he started from as a young quarterback to where he is now is probably the single greatest improvement as a quarterback in terms of the dedication, in terms of the result of the hard work. I mean, literally, if you ask Tom Brady, what do you like to do? He's going to tell you, I like watching film. What do you like to do outside of football? I like watching film about football. Okay, what do you like to do away from football? I like to look at the other teams in the league, and I like to, you're like, dude, do you have any other interest besides football? No. And when you see a guy that's able to dedicate his life to something and go from where he was to where he is now, he's the greatest. I don't think there's a better quarterback. I don't think someone's going to come along and tackle any of his records. I think that potentially, maybe not with another organization, would he have gotten 6 rings, but that dude's a winner. A guy like that would have propelled any team, maybe even the Detroit Lions, to a Super Bowl. I don't believe he's a product of the system. I believe that in combination with his efforts and his skill and getting him the right pieces around him. I mean, look what he's done. Look who he's done it with. I mean, all you gotta do, if you just want to look at it in a microcosm, just look at that game versus Jacksonville. You're down, and the sign of your greatness is in that second half. If you would have polled everybody in a bar, if you would have polled everybody in the country, 99.9% of people would have said, Tom Brady got this. It ain't over. 10-point lead. Oh, 8 minutes left. Tom Brady, he got this. No problem. And that's the sign of a great player, is that you know that a complete football game has to take place. You saw it last year. They were down 25 points. They were able to handle their business and come back. That's the sign of a great team and a great player, is until that clock hits 0-0 and there's no time left, Tom Brady and his team will always have a chance. He is probably the greatest football player of all time.
All right, I don't want you to think too hard about this. I'm just going to ask you a question, and I want you to say whatever pops into your mind first. Is the New England dynasty, is it more Belichick or is it more Brady?
It's probably more Belichick. I do believe that you have to have a quarterback, but at the same time, there's two sides to the ball, offense and defense, and there's also the responsibility that Bill Belichick has to bring in talent. When you see the ability to almost flawlessly, literally, you can't on your hands count the number of times he cut somebody and it came back to really bite him in the ass. He's done such a fabulous job of molding that whole organization. Tom Brady's a huge part of it, but a bigger part of that organization is Bill Belichick. You got to coach the offense, the defense. You got to keep players in line. You got to build a structure. Literally, how do you go out there and show Bill Belichick respect? You have half a dozen organizations trying to copy you. Literally, Bill Belichick is one of the greatest coaches of all time, and for his role in that organization in terms of keeping everything in check, basically across the league, every other job, you got to go there and do your job and handle your business, or you'll get cut. You got to do your job. You got to, be a player that is in line and has a personality. At New England, you know who the boss is. It's Bill Belichick. You don't mess around. You mess around, you're out. Across the league, it's a players' league, and they have more respect than their coaches. Everybody knows that goes to New England. You could take the biggest malcontents. You could take anybody, stick them in New England. All of a sudden, they're different. It's like they've awoken and they've figured out, hey, I used to have problems. Now I don't. Hell, if I make a mistake, I'm out. What I'm trying to say is that players across the league have a lot more power than their coaches because of the situation. I do believe the buck stops with Bill Belichick, and he's able to instill a level of confidence and professionalism at the highest level. That's all you can say is organizations are trying to copy it.
All right, sticking with football and sticking with this concept of the Super Bowl, does history end up repeating itself? Because back in 2014, the Eagles played the Patriots, and the Patriots were able to sit there and come away the victor in a 24-21 Super Bowl, which was outstanding at the time. Now, I want to go a little bit deeper here and factor some other things in. If you remember what happened in that 24 or in that Super Bowl that took place in February 6th of 2005, Justin Timberlake also performed at that Super Bowl. And if you remember correctly, that was the wardrobe malfunction. And if you're a fan of radio, if you like radio, if you remember everything that happened, this is when you started to get your delay in radio, your 10-second delay. And if you remember what happened with television, this Super Bowl totally altered television history, and radio history. So this Super Bowl was super important to the way things are done now, present day. But at the time, this was a crowning achievement for the Patriots as well. So does history repeat itself, and do the Patriots win, or do the Philadelphia Eagles get revenge? I want you to give your early prediction now.
Many people are going to look to see, okay, is Rob Gronkowski going to actually play? By all accounts, people are talking that he is. And so with an entire complete team, it'd be crazy not to pick New England. But I do think that Philadelphia has a puncher's chance if they can execute their game plan. I mean, Jim Schwartz, for all the criticisms that he had and incurred being the coach of the Lions, he's a masterful defensive coordinator. I think that's probably his ceiling. He's a wonderful asset to a defense. He's able to draw up complex plays. He can plug and play different pieces for a scheme. But in the end, can he outduel New England? I probably doubt it. I just think that the combination of Bill Belichick and Tom Brady with 2 weeks to prepare, if it was a 1 week preparation, I would give Philadelphia maybe a 48% chance. With the extra week for Bill Belichick, for everybody to get healthy, for everything to take place and the like, I give right now the New England Patriots a 65% chance of winning the game. I just think that it's going to be a really close game. And in the end, in close games, when you're going to need a team to make plays, I can't see myself predicting Nick Foles to fling the ball all over the ground in crunch situations. It'll be close. I do believe it'll be a very close game within a touchdown. But in the end, I do believe New England's going to walk away with the victory. They just got too many, good pieces. I mean, you got Danny Amendola looking like, Jerry Rice out there. You got Rob Gronkowski's going to come back. You got the pieces of an offense and a defense. I mean, you literally probably in the game have the best coaching staff ever assembled. You have the best offensive coordinator in the game, the best defensive coordinator in the game, and the best head coach with the best quarterback. How do you pick against that? It would take basically a complete solid effort. You'd have to probably expect Nick Foles to do even better than he did versus Minnesota. I can't call that.
So what you're saying is Justin Timberlake will have Janet Jackson back on stage, and he will rip her shirt off, and we will see her boob again. Okay.
Yeah.
So sticking with football, what are your thoughts on the former offensive coordinator Don Treadwell coming back to MSU, but this time to coach the defensive backs, the special teams, and to act as an offensive coordinator or consultant?
Yeah. Well, listen. In the world of coaching, you start to recognize, and similar to the search that Bob Quinn is undertaking, you want to go with comfort. And right away, now this is the third time that Treadwell is coming back to Michigan State. There's a comfort level there with D'Antonio. There's been success there. And if you recall, Mark D'Antonio previously, I think 6-7 years ago, had a heart condition. And as a result of it, Treadwell was tasked with the job of overseeing that program, and he did a solid job by all accounts. So I'm not surprised at all. I do believe he's a very solid coach. There's been success there, and who else knows the program as well as Coach Treadwell does? So I do believe at the point now where Michigan State's football program is, on the verge of taking that next step again, maybe getting back to Big Ten title contention, I think he's the right man to come back. And as a coach, Michigan State, Mark D'Antonio, you're looking for comfort. You're looking for somebody that you can trust to do your job, handle your business. And the loss of Barnett to Florida State was a tough one. By all accounts, they tried to keep him by offering him more money, but Florida State came at him with a package that he could not decline. So I'm all cool with Treadwell handling the business, doing what he's got to do, helping out that coaching staff. I do believe there's going to be success with this coaching staff right now. I'm happy with it right now. In terms of what Mark D'Antonio is able to do, he's the head of the football program. He's a very respected coach. Just based on what you saw with the comeback after a 3-win season to have a 10-win season, by bringing back a guy that you're comfortable with, it just helps the cause.
Do you think it's smart, though, to have a coach come and basically play on the other side of the ball? In this case, Treadwell is, I may have misspoke earlier, Treadwell is not going to be the offensive coordinator. He's just going to be an offensive consultant, but he will be more or less working on the defensive side of the ball and with the special teams.
Right.
So do you think it's smart to have a coach come in and somebody who has basically done it on one side of the ball come in and then try to apply that expertise in reverse on the other side of the ball?
Of course, because who else is better than Mark D'Antonio? I do believe that coaches have, look at potentially the new Lions head coach. He also did some work on the offensive side of the ball in New England. Coaching is about relating to players. It's about executing schemes. It's a lot about psychology and motivation. And at the same time, the buck stops on the defense with Mark D'Antonio. So while Treadwell will have a role I like the role in its entirety. Offensive consultant, the offense, is going to have some continuity with the offensive staff. You have talent at different positions. I'm a little bit concerned regarding some of the transfers, but there's a lot of talent at the top end. So the depth has been kind of lessened with the transfers, but the top guys are still the top guys with some new guys coming in. So it's looking good for Michigan State football in 2018. I don't see any problem with Coach Treadwell doing work on the other side of the ball.
All right, sticking with MSU, and again, like I was saying earlier, this podcast is special because we really do come full circle in it on a number of different stories, and much like an onion, you just kind of keep peeling back the layers. With MSU, it's now official. Larry Nassar is going to be sentenced to 40 to 175 years for sexually assaulting female athletes. Whether they be in the U.S. Olympic team or they happen to go to MSU. Overall, do you think that punishment is acceptable, or would you have liked it to have been, I don't know if any way, harsher?
Yeah, I want to play this clip from ABC News. Let's just get a glimpse of what the judge told him. I mean, literally, she threw the book at him. She was not impressed with his, letter addressing the court. She said, "You're a monster. You've not demonstrated remorse. You're still a monster. You're a threat. And so I just signed your death warrant." 175 years, it kind of seems like not enough. I literally would throw out a number, maybe like 500 years, because of the fact of what devastation this man caused and what it's done to the university, what it's done to these women, their lives. Let's just get a quick glimpse of what the judge said.
You, sir, decided to plead because there was no medical treatment. You did this for your pleasure and your control. This letter, which comes 2 months after your plea, tells me that you have not yet owned what you did, that you still think that somehow you are right, that you are a doctor, that you're entitled, that you don't have to listen, and that you did treatment. I wouldn't send my dogs to you, sir.
I mean, literally, she threw the book at him. She was harsh and warranted. There was an ovation when he left the courtroom because of the fact that, listen, he's not contrite. He's not showing any sort of remorse. And that's probably how I thought it would go regarding somebody like this. And so when you come out and make excuses, it's just terrible. And so to talk about it, everyone's talking about what is going on with Dr. Larry Nassar, what has happened. And really, it goes to show you, when you peel back the onion regarding what's going on with Michigan State, what's going on with USA Gymnastics, one of the first things that you look at is we got to teach people to report faster. We got to teach people that, hey, you can't have a dozen people who potentially knew about this and not report it. It should never have gotten to 165 victims, across several years. People knew about this sooner. It's disgusting in so many ways to look at how an institution like USA Gymnastics, how Michigan State could allow this to happen for so long. Look, there's bad people out there. There are criminals. There are sexual predators. I deal with it every day. And you say to yourself, wow, how did this take place over this course of time? It's disgusting on so many levels. One, that it was allowed to go on this long. Two, since the investigation, since the victims have come out, Michigan State has looked completely inept in every single way trying to talk about it. It's like, you know what? I would have probably been much more supportive if they just came out and said, look, we're an organization. This happened. We're focused on money. We're focused on something else. But to come out and try to act like you care when you really don't is really frustrating, because all you're seeing is a bunch of real comments then being doubled down with what's supposed to be politically correct comments. Really, in essence, Michigan State doesn't care about these women. And that's what hurts the most, is they don't care. From Joel Ferguson to Luana K. Simon to the Board of Trustees, what hurts supporters, what hurts alumni is knowing that the institution you support does not really care about the abuse of people that went to someone that worked there. They don't care. And you can try and fake it. You can try and come out with these PR statements. In the end, it sucks to know, and we've talked about it, and cognitively you're aware of it. Sometimes there are people who just care about business and money, and they don't care about people. They don't sometimes mix business and, emotions, and doing the right thing sometimes don't mix. And it sucks, because that if I was running Michigan State, I would have resigned by now. I would have said, look, I failed the organization. I failed all these women. How did this not come up to my desk faster? How did I not attend to this? Dr. Larry Nassar should not have been allowed to oversee and run his practice that way, and to do those things to ruin the lives of so many people. It sucks because, in essence, Michigan State does not care. By what's been said, by how they've handled it, they truly do not care. They're in the mode of, how do we save as much money from all these lawsuits? How do we say the right things when you just innately don't know it? So if you don't know what to say, fine. Then they really should just shut up and not anymore. They should no longer address the media. In terms of how this is played out, the sad part is this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning of what's going on, because the NCAA is now going to investigate. Nationally, people are going to look at it. You're going to have hundreds of journalists look at it, and the truth is going to come out. And probably what's going to be revealed is not going to be pretty. It's going to be, stuff that you and I joke about in terms of people don't care about their jobs. They just do whatever. I mean, Luana K. Simon is just like, oh, there's someone out there potentially molesting people? Sure, do a report. Okay, when's it due? I don't know, whenever I just put it on my desk, I'll look at it. Like, what? If that would have came across my desk, I'd be like, whoa, let's commission a committee. What's going on? How do we stop this? Let's remove this. Let's prevent this from happening. I would be more proactive. And Michigan State decided to just be like, oh, this whole Larry Nassar thing, well, whatever. There's other people that could have probably stopped it, or this no big deal, or are we getting sued, or what's going on, or is this guy still working for us? Or, you know what, did we get all the money from the services that he did? So everything that they're focused on is nowhere near the proper thing that they need to be looked at. And so everything that they're doing now is disingenuous. We know, supporters know, that the president, the board of trustees has no clue what they're doing. I mean, after this happened, they had the gall to have a 5-hour meeting, and she's still the president. Either way, whether she knew or didn't know, she's responsible. Dr. Simon is responsible for what goes on in the university. And when this happens, she should have been removed. And for all supporters, it's probably frustrating sitting here knowing that the university is being besmirched. The university is going to take a massive hit because of ineptness. And for that fact, it's embarrassing. It's disgusting. And you just hope and pray that, the support that's been given, even, Luana K. Simon coming out and saying, look, we're allocating $10 million. It's probably not even enough. You probably need to allocate $50 million. But there's nothing they can do because of the fact that deep down, everybody knows, the supporters and non-supporters know, that Michigan State put things that were nowhere near important as priorities above victims. And that's sad to know that people will look to business and covering their ass as opposed to helping people and doing the right thing. And it's disgusting all the way around. This monster's now going to go to jail for 200 years, but his legacy is going to be long-lasting with all these lives that he's affected. And it's gross because it could have been stopped. It could have been stopped, way, way prior. And what's kind of gross to think about is that when this investigation takes place, we're probably going to hear that this dude set up a system where he had his boys, he had his crew of supporters that set up these girls to get molested. Like, look, you got to go see Dr. Nassar. You got to go see him. You have all these people that support this monster. And so it's sad that this is probably going to be revealed. And an investigation needs to take place outside of the bullshit one that Michigan State tried to roll out there.
Yeah, and I guess the final question I had for you was, what was your reaction to Luana K. Simon still being employed?
She should be fired.
But I obviously, your reaction... You already spoke for yourself. I mean, this was a woman who basically allowed Dr. Nassar to continue to operate for another 18 to 19 months while he was under investigation.
Why?
And all this falls at the feet of Luana K. Simon and to this board of trustees on MSU's behalf here. It blows my mind that this was able to go on for so long. And it wasn't just for that 18 or 19 months while he was able to continue to do what he was doing while he was under investigation. It was the 20 to 30 years prior that set up and led to all of this and led to this investigation.
Okay, but now
he was found out.
Removing emotion from it, okay, because I can understand the other side. Okay, being a rational person, obviously I'm angry at the side of the president of the university. I'm angry at their reaction. Okay, but now I got to throw it out there and say, okay, now I'm going to put myself in her shoes. She's like, look, if we admit we're guilty, I'm basically writing a check for $500 million to these people. I bankrupt the university. Her job is delicate, but in the end,
Shouldn't she just walk
Bankrupt
away?
university?
No, but shouldn't she walk away? Look, whether what you're saying, I get what you're saying, right? She has an obligation to try to protect the university and protect, keep the university afloat for, I guess, as long as possible, right? So I get that. I know what you're saying. But wouldn't it stand to reason from her standpoint to
walk away?
Yes.
Walk away.
Just resign and say, you know what? I made a mistake. It's on me. Before anything else happens, I am walking away. And then just disappear. Up and disappear. I mean, go live off the grid someplace and make it extremely hard for the university and for these representatives to come back and find you. Just go away.
Exactly. And so it's just sometimes you got to bite the bullet and you got to recognize mistakes were made. And hopefully, sometimes you hate for your university to be the model and example of what not to do. But hopefully with the fines, with the lawsuits, that this never happens again, that there is no more lack of institutional control. You got to put together an organization that recognizes what's going on. You can't be ignorant. You can't bury your head in the sand. This kind of stuff can't happen. The sick part is that people knew it could have been stopped. People could have stopped this, and it didn't happen. And I hope that with the investigations, investigative journalists do their job, and they reveal the truth as to who knew what when. That's what we got to know. So it's a sad situation. But again, we support the victims. We support those that came out and verbally spoke on this. At least now we know it's over. This man's in jail. This man's reign of terror is over. Thank God.
Yeah, finally. I mean, 20, 30 years too late, but finally it's over.
It's finally over. And you hope that these survivors can gain the strength by being collective, by supporting each other, and by continuing to really be survivors and live their life and not let this man ruin the rest of their remaining days. Let this guy rot in jail, and hopefully there's some way for everyone to heal from this. And it's going to take time. This is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. All right, cuz, good podcast. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for giving me the platform. Let me feel a lot better being a Michigan State supporter, kind of talking about these things. And now, like I said, at the time of this recording, the judge threw the book at him, and well-deserved. Well-deserved. For the Jock, Adam Strozinski, I'm the Jock. Yeah, I'm the Jock. For the Jock, Adam Strozinski, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. See everybody next week. I look forward to it.
Go Detroit sports, I guess. Who cares?
This was locker room talk.
Second deck.
Sorry, Detroit. Didn't quite work out.
And all I can say is Detroit Sports Podcast scores.
I hear voices in my head. They counsel me. They understand. They talk to me.